Prepare for takeoff, please.
It's the Shipping Pod. Hello and welcome to the Shipping Pod. I am your host, Tim Dooner, here today with a continuation of our last episode, Riskier Isthmus. But first, if you would like to give back to the Shipping Pod, you can do so by rating and reviewing the show on iTunes. We have 17 reviews on there now, so you guys have been just killing it. You've been knocking it out of the park. Thank you to each and every single one of you who took the time to do that. The other way is via our Patreon. You can visit that site at patreon.com/theshippingpod. That's patreon.com/theshippingpod. On Patreon, you can give back to the show in a variety of ways. There's perks involved that range anything from on-air shoutouts to light advertising for your company, guest appearances, all that sort of rigmarole. Go visit the site, patreon.com/theshippingpod. Did y'all have a great Mother's Day? I know I did, but a little stressful getting up to it. Anything that could go wrong did go wrong. My sister recently got a new house, and, on Mother's Day morning, her septic system flooded. She was supposed to host Mother's Day. Well, the S hit the proverbial fan, or in this case, leaked out onto the floor. And we had to move venues to my mother's place in Charlestown. She had just lost her refrigerator. That had melted down on her, so she was in the process of getting a new refrigerator. But went out, we got some pizza. Cowabunga, dudes. Everyone was there together. Turned out great. Unfortunately, we got some bad news on the dog end. I'd mentioned that their dog, the Maltese, had been sick. He had his biopsy done. It came back cancerous. So, Bailey, wishing you all the best. But all in all, it could have been a huge disaster, but it ended up being salvaged, as great company can do. Speaking of catastrophes, I got a show recommendation this week. It's an Amazon Prime original series called Catastrophe. It's on season 3 now. I had only learned of it this week, and my wife and I have started binge watching it. It's about a guy from Boston who, on a business trip, has a one-night stand with an Irish lass and ends up getting her pregnant. So he moves to London where she lives, and they try and make it all work out. And that's basically the premise of the show. I don't want to give too much away. Each episode's only 24 minutes long. Only 6 episodes per season, so pretty easy to breeze through. We have about 5 episodes left in season 3. I will say this, though. I love season 1 a lot. I like the dark and sarcastic humor that was in that one, but season 2, the writing, it just got a little bit more, I don't know, cynical? Somber? Serious? And it also, the episode starts like it feels like they skipped an entire season, and suddenly you're thrust into, I don't want to give a spoiler, but a little bit later into their life than I would have liked. I would have liked to see the developmental years, you know? I don't know, maybe they'll have a prequel season. Who knows? But anyways, check it out. Catastrophe. Good show. Good show on Amazon if you like that type of humor. Watch the pilot. If you don't like the pilot, you're not going to like the series. It's pretty much that simple. What else? The only other thing is, as I'd mentioned, I've been out in the job market, I've been looking, I've been interviewing, I've had great response. But, and this isn't the whole industry, but some recruiters, man, like how cheesy can they get? And I'm not going to name names or companies, and this isn't recruiters across the board. And if you're on LinkedIn, you probably see the cesspool of recruiter battles that goes on, where complaints by people using recruiters, complaints by recruiters themselves. I block all of those. I have no interest in getting into that fray. That said, I've dealt with a few good recruiters and then a few recruiters who, I swear, all of these companies do, some of them, not all of them, some of them go on LinkedIn Jobs or ZipRecruiter and they just repost listings that are already there. And the kicker is, when you talk to them on the phone, especially if you, as I have interviewed with some of these repostings that they've put, they try to act like there's some sort of gatekeeper or barrier. You're not hired by the company. You just reposted the job. I don't know. I don't really get that industry. I don't know anybody who works in that industry. Like I said, I've worked for a few great individuals in them. I believe those are the ones hired by companies, and I guess the other ones, maybe independent agents. I'm not sure. I bet it's a tough racket trying to place people. Not trying to denigrate an industry. Just like there's bad freight forwarders, bad brokers, there's definitely bad recruiters. No industry is immune. And we still have a lot to cover. We split last week's episode in two. We were going to talk about the Panama Canal. We got up to August 15th, 1914, which was when the canal had just opened with the passage of the SS Akon as the first commercial vessel to make its way through the waterway. And as you know, August 15th, 1914, just 2.5 weeks earlier on July 28th, World War I had begun. Although the canal was a historic feat of engineering, its early years of operation were plagued by bad timing, bad luck, and acts of God. And although the geopolitical considerations behind the project were largely inspired by the U.S. military strategist Alfred Mahan, who wrote The Influence of Sea Power, the Panama Canal played virtually no role in military operations during World War I. And that was a bit of a surprise for me to learn. But even more of a surprise that it really didn't play much of a role during World War II either. In fact, the canal soon became underutilized as global trade was stymied by the Great War. Landslides shut down the entire system for most of 1915 and 1916, then again in 1917 and 1920. Major strikes led to additional shutdowns in 1916 and 1917. It wouldn't be until after the war, in 1919, that the canal started being utilized to its full potential. 1919 also began the Red Sox streak of not winning a World Series. Up until 2004, though. See, that broke. Can't do that cheer anymore, can you, New York? Just kidding. Love you guys. A lot of family in New York. The very presence of the canal led to decades of instability in the region. Backed by the treaty Panama signed in 1904 when they gained their independence, the U.S. openly intervened in any Panamanian uprisings that erupted in the area. Many of those uprisings were born of fear out of concern that foreign powers may try to overtake the canal during the war. So interestingly enough, even though the canal itself wasn't a part of military operations, wasn't a part of the Great War, the just very specter of the war led to instability in the area, but this instability would persist throughout the history of the Panama Canal from the beginning of building it all the way up until it was turned back over to Panama. In effect, during the war, the only armed military intervention in Panama was by the U.S. themselves. They were often asked by the elites in power to quelch uprisings and bring in the Marines and shut down protests. After the war, on July 12, 1920, a formal dedication was made signaling a grand reopening of the canal. So, rocky start with the uprisings, war breaking out, really bad timing to open a canal, right? Really bad timing to open a trade route when trade is slowing down. But they weathered the storm. 1920 comes. During this time, trade increased and passage through the canal raised year over year. In the 1930s, a dam was built to increase water flow, and throughout time, improvements were made on the 3 locks. After World War II, where again the canal proved to be a minor asset, U.S. control of the canal zone became a major point of contention between the U.S., Panama, and Colombia. There were student protests, political uprisings, and diplomatic maneuverings. This all put pressure on the U.S. to cede control of the canal. In fact, it may have been the U.S. own diplomatic maneuvering that proved to be the catalyst for Panama regaining their sovereignty. It was the US who helped force France and the UK to abandon their own bid to reclaim the Suez Canal in Egypt. And there's the Suez Canal, as we mentioned on the last episode. The Suez Canal, the fact that it could even be built was what led the French to start building the Panama Canal, which they couldn't complete and ended up selling to the US. But here it comes up once again in history. So, in 1977, the US and Panama signed a treaty that would give the Panama Canal Authority full command of the waterway at noon on December 31st, 1999. That's right before Y2K. Remember those fears? They have those at the canal? You're going to be able to get to the canal if the computers can't calculate the zero at the end? I actually have a CD-ROM which is surviving Y2K somewhere in my basement. And I actually forget what was on there. I think it told me to take all my money out of the bank, but I was like 19 at the time, so I didn't really have much money. Like, yeah, I'll take my $325 out of the bank. Nah, I'll keep it in there because, like, if Y2K happened, maybe it would add some extra zeros to, the bank account. $325. That's money I'd play with. So here we are. We go from 1914 to 1999. Panama Canal, run by the U.S., finally turned back to Panama after those initial hiccups with the World War, landslides, uprisings, etc. The trade route was all grown up. Let's talk a bit about the layout of the canal. The Panama Canal, which connects the Atlantic on the east to the Pacific on the west, consists of 3 locks and runs 48 miles. It's made up of artificial lakes and channels, as well as Madden Lake, which serves as a reservoir. From the Manzanillo Bay breakwater entrance in the Atlantic, ships come into the Port of Cologne, enter the longest of the locks, the Gatun Locks, which run 26 miles through Gatun Lake, Alula Lake, and the Culebra Cut. Ships then enter the Pedro Miguel Locks through Miraflores Lake for the shortest sail of the 3 locks at 9.5 miles, before entering Miraflores Locks for the last 16.5 miles of the voyage, crossing out through the Port of Balboa, under the Bridge of Americas, and spilling out into the Pacific Ocean. A little bit about its purpose for trade. The size of the locks determine the maximum size of the ships that may pass through. As global trade increased with the advent of the shipping container, vessel sizes ballooned. And if you want to hear about the history of the shipping container, just go back to episode 15. It's got all you would ever need to know about how the shipping container came to be. Due to canal restrictions, vessels with trade routes via it are built to specific size. These are known as Panamax vessels. The general characteristics of a Panamax vessel are 950 feet long, with a beam, aka width, of 106 feet, and a height of 190 feet, a max capacity of 5,000 TEUs. TEUs are 20-foot equivalent containers. Thereby, a 40-foot container, which is also a standard size, would be 2 TEUs. Initially, the Gatun Locks were only designed to be 94 feet wide, but at the behest of the U.S. Navy, in 1908, the decision was made to build those out to 110 feet wide. The size of the locks, along with the height of the Bridge of the Americas, ultimately decided the Panamax vessel dims. The steel lock gates themselves are 6.6 feet thick, 64 feet wide, 66 feet high. Hey, I wonder if Trump knows about those things, because they would make a hell of a border wall, that's for sure. And those are just the gates. The locks themselves are 1,050 feet long, 49 feet thick at the base, and 79 feet high. Sound huge, right? Well, that was their size for a time, but in 2006, it was decided to go bigger! Thus began the third set of locks project, which would double the capacity of the canal by adding an additional lane of traffic and increased the width and depth. This expansion created the new Panamax vessels, or Neo-Panamax vessels. And these bad boys, they're 1,201 feet long, 161 feet wide, and 190 feet tall. And the reason for that 190 feet tall is because that's the clearance for the Bridge of Americas, which is still there. These guys hold 13,000 TEUs compared to the original Panamax vessels, which only did 5,000 TEUs. So they almost tripled capacity on these things. The expansion opened for commercial operation on the 26th of June 2016 after roughly 9 years of construction. This time with a lot less death from malaria, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. The opening of the expansion had some impact on U.S. ports on the East Coast due to these new Panamax vessels and larger liners in general, which includes the dredging of the port of New York, New Jersey, as well as raising the clearance of the Bayonne Bridge to 215 feet. And as we reported on last week's episode, Chris Christie has announced that that project on the Bayonne Bridge is ahead of schedule. It's going to be done next month, 6 months early. So, go Chris Christie. The Port of Miami has recently approved a deep dredge, while Savannah and Charleston are caught up in controversies regarding deep dredging. Limited federal funding, as well as state and federal lawsuits by environmental groups who oppose the dredging techniques of the Savannah River, have slowed these ports. In fact, Georgia politicians are lobbying Trump hard to inject federal funds into the $706 million project. And, well, since any mention of Trump seems to trigger people from all sides of the aisles, I'd like to point out that this funding initiative is a bipartisan effort by those states. So, it's not a Trump thing, it's not a Republican thing, it's not a Democrat thing, it's all of them. They all want to dredge this thing. It's them versus the environmental groups. Excuse me. Swig a Diet Coke for the working man, as Stone Cold Steve Austin would say. Fellow podcaster, by the way. But that's the Panama Canal expansion. It's been running for nearly a year now, as we mentioned, and it opened up at the end of June last year. Hey, how are they going to pay for all this stuff? Well, I'm glad you asked. Tolls. For container ships, the toll is assessed based on TEUs. Effective April 1st, 2016, the toll went from $74 per loaded container to $60 per TEU capacity, plus $30 per loaded container, for a potential $90 per TEU when the ship is full. Your forwarder may charge you at cost there, perhaps a slight handling fee. But if you have one of those cheesy, crummy forwarders out there, you could see a much higher rate. Accessorials. Audit your bills, people. Trust me. See what they're putting on there. Let's break out the calculator. A full new Panamax vessel holds 13,000 TEUs. So if she's full, she's paying a toll of $90 times 13,000, assuming no empties, totally at capacity. That's, wow, 1,170,000 smackers. And you thought the Mass Pike was busting your bees. Well, it's a hefty toll to pay, and I believe they have to pay that in cash, so, don't let the Somali pirates know, because, these boats are running around with well over $1 million on them to pay the toll fee, because they don't got no easy pass on the Panama Canal. Sounds like some pretty ripe targets to me, not that I want to give Somalian pirates any ideas. I don't even know if Somalian pirates listen to podcasts. I have listeners in 50 countries, but I do not believe that Somalia is one of them. But if you are out there, I apologize for giving you any bad ideas. But cargo ships are not the only vessels that go through the Panama Canal. Cruise ships do as well. In fact, you can take specific cruise that would take you through the Panama Canal so you can see this historic place. They're assessed by the number of berths. Not women in labor, but the number of passengers that can be accompanied in permanent beds. Not sure exactly what that means. Does that mean one person per bed? 2 people per bed? Is a queen two? A single one? I'm not sure. It doesn't say. What's a twin? I don't know. But it says can be accompanied in permanent beds. And that would be $111 for an unoccupied bed, $138 per occupied. Well, okay. Well, that makes it seem like each bed itself is $138 regardless of how many people you got in there. How many berths are going on. Or not. I don't know. We'll look more into that. Since cargo and cruise ships have to pay for empty containers and beds, they really want these things full at time of crossing. Pleasure boats go through as well, personal watercraft. Those pay by length, which ranges between $800 at the low end and $3,200 at the long end. The average toll is $54,000, but average may not be a great number to look at here because, well, if you have a Panamax ship paying $1 million, but then you have the pleasure boat paying $800 in your dinghy, it's quite a wide range. So during high traffic times, there is a transit slot auction system where vessels can pay a premium to cut the line. In fact, in 2006, a tanker paid $220,000 to avoid a 7-day delay. Its regular toll would have been a paltry $13,430, so they really needed to get through there. Do the airlines do that yet? I wouldn't be surprised if they, like Southwest or whatever, you can... I guess they have first class, right? Do you get bumped from first class? There's kind of like an airline witch hunt on TV. Every single person who gets talked back to on an airline, posting their videos on social media. Some of the situations are just ridiculous. Some of them the airlines do look bad in. I don't know. I'm over this whole airline thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if they instituted some sort of congestion pay-to-play thing, right? The lowest toll ever paid was in 1928 by Richard Halliburton, 36 cents to swim the canal. By the way, Richard Halliburton, if you don't know, was a novelist and adventurer who vanished at sea when he was 39 after encountering a typhoon. One of his last messages at sea was the morbidly ironic, "Having a wonderful time. Wish you were here instead of me." Or maybe just delightfully sarcastic. And this guy, he was like the Elvis or Tupac of his day. Some people thought he faked his death and was living life on a private island. Even the Coast Guard and Navy, they didn't even go looking for him at first because they thought his disappearance was a stunt to begin with. They thought it was some sort of publicity stunt. He was in a Chinese junk boat trying to do this crossing, so not a safe boat to begin with, but it does not seem like he made it. Or maybe he is on that island with Elvis and Tupac. How old would Tupac be if he was still alive? What was he, like 20? Was he 27 too? Was that 1997 that he was shot, or was it 1999? It was after that Tyson fight, right? So, what is it, 20 years later? So, I don't know, he wouldn't even be like 50, right? Like 47. He could be doing like easy jazz records at this point. I would like to see an older Tupac's records. As long as he wasn't doing gangster rap, because, I don't know. Like, I was at Coachella a couple years ago, and Dr. Dre was up there trying to do his songs from The Chronic, and it was fine. Actually, Tupac was up there, too. There's a holographic Tupac up there. I mean, it was all right, but it's like, at the same time, you're 45, 47 years old? I don't know. As I get older, I'm starting to turn into, that old man. I was just actually yelling at a bunny that was on my lawn earlier today. That's the kind of guy I'm turning into. That's what age and children will do to you. I'm warning you. If you are like 22 years old and you don't have children, don't get older and don't have children. And then you won't have my problems. Anyway, let's get to some numbers and facts. Over 1 million vessels have crossed the canal. The millionth vessel just crossed through a couple years ago. Current annual revenue is over $2 billion. Two of the canal's ports, Colón and Balboa, are the number 1 and number 3 busiest in Latin America. Top countries crossing the canal, in order, are the US, China, Chile, Japan, Colombia, and South Korea. Top commodities, petroleum, grains, coal, ores and metal, chemicals, nitrates, and other, which I guess would just be FAK general cargo. Panama has the third most container traffic in the Americas, behind the US and Brazil. 40 ships pass through the canal on a daily basis. I believe absolute max churn is 48 ships, and if that's like if everything's running smoothly, but the average would be about 40 ships with 13,000 to 14,000 going through per year. Takes 8 to 10 hours to sail the canal, though traffic and congestion can cause substantial delays at port, keeping you at anchor prior to entering. Time spent there obviously depends on how many boats are there, if you're there in peak season or not, depending on weather. They do have a very wet season there. There's a hurricane season that goes there that can make travel inhospitable. But you can also pay to play. You could pay to cut the line. Substantial amount of money. But if you really needed to get to the other side, gotta do what you gotta do, my man. Here's an interesting one that I didn't think of, but it makes absolute sense. Only Panama Canal pilots working with the Panama Canal Authority are able to captain a boat through the canal. They have full control over the boat from entry to exit, so they get it on at the entrance, take you all the way through. After 10 hours, walk the gangplank and jump off board. The locks have 2 lanes, allowing multiple ships to pass at the same time. However, the direction of the locks is switched every 6 hours, and priority is given to larger ships. And that, therein, is part of the reason it takes those 8 to 10 hours to only go that 48 miles. Highest paid toll ever, $829,000 by the MOL benefactor. Benefactor indeed to the people of Panama. And that was a 10,000 TEU vessel. So that's where the huge toll came in, because they had they were getting hit for what, $90 a pop per box. And it wasn't 900,000 because it probably wasn't full. May have been some empties. That changes some of the costing. But wow, average of 82.9 bucks a box. Big money. And that's about it for the Panama Canal. Between this episode and last, we covered the construction, we covered its uses, we covered the costs, anything you want to do. Go down there, check it out. Closest I have ever been is Puerto de Limon in Costa Rica, where I stayed at the lovely Banana Azul. And that was actually in Limon, not Puerto de Limon, I think, right? Puerto de Limon is where all the containers are, and Limon is where Banana Azul is, or am I getting it the other way around? It would make sense that Puerto de Limon is where the containers come in. I'm not sure. I wasn't driving. We booked the thing through American Express, and American Express was awesome. They set up everything. They set up our travel and how we got everywhere. All we had to do was wake up and jump inside of a van with a stranger. This was pre-Uber too, so, it wasn't something people did every day. But, for our country, jumped in. We had this one guy, Bruley. He was great. He would pull over once in a while, stop to make us look at sloths. But the drive down from San Jose, the airport over there, it was something. Well, we went to Arenal first. That was maybe a 2-3 hour drive. Then from Arenal, a couple days later, we went down to Puerto de Limon. That was 8 hours. And it's not necessarily a long drive so much as you're behind 18-wheelers pulling containers down to the port the whole entire way. Just a long, long line of them. And it's kind of a scary drive too, because at points you hit where a 2-lane road going both directions turns into a one-way road, and they don't have like stop signs or anything on these little bridges and these interchanges. So I have no idea how these guys determine who goes first and who doesn't. Thank God I wasn't driving. Thank you, Brulio, for getting us where we needed to go. But I recommend doing it despite the long drive. Because, at least for me, I'm not staying on the West Coast at some resort like Sandals with a wristband on, being fed Cisco food, hanging out with a bunch of other tourists who don't speak the language. Not me. No way. I'm a man of the people. I want some culture on my vacation. I'm the Anthony Bourdain of supply chain, man. Don't you forget it. That's the way to go, right? So good. Just ask my wife. That's why she married me. Oh well. So there you go. Go to Panama. I'm going to go to Panama. Maybe we can go together. Drop me a line. Let's get to some news. What is in the news, people? Lowe's. Lowe's has been using exoskeletons developed in partnership with Virginia Tech at their Christiansburg, Virginia store. The suits give you all the mad gains without any of the squats and protein shakes. However, this is just a pilot program, and their cost will likely keep them from any practical widespread usage anytime soon. And they look really neat. It's like a back brace support with, I don't know if they're hydraulics or not. I watched a video. Don't know exactly the operation of them, but they support your arms, they support your backs, and they support your legs, and they allow people to lift substantially more. Beyond warehouses, this would be a great application for people with spinal injuries, right? People in wheelchairs. Get them into some exosuits. Get them up and running again. Maybe when my kids are 14, 15, they're watching the Boston Marathon. Maybe then there'll be the exoskeleton race, and it'll be completely normal to see. I'd like that, right? That seems like a good use of development, right? Come on, Lowe's and Virginia Tech. Bring it to the people. Speaking of exosuits, there's that new Alien movie is out. Have you guys seen it? I haven't. I did see Prometheus. It was alright. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad. What irked me about the movie was that these people are supposed to be scientists and engineers, but they make a ton of really just dumb horror movie mistakes that, when it happens in a slasher film like Friday the 13th, it's an 18-year-old counselor who's high doing something stupid. But when it's an astronaut engineer, I don't know. Didn't really like it that much, but maybe this one's a bit better. Maybe we'll actually get some aliens in it. It looks like you sure do from the previews. And, you know what I would like? I'd like one of those exosuits that Ripley had on in Aliens. You know, the big yellow one? You could box a T-Rex in one of those. Now, either way, maybe I'll... my theater around here. I have a local theater, and on Tuesdays, they have movies for like $5. And today, when I'm recording, is Tuesday. I'm getting this one in early. Maybe I will go down to Patriot Cinema in Hanover. Check out the new Alien film. If I do, I'll let you know all about it next week. U.S. farmers are not fans of the new shipping alliances. Larger ships and fewer port calls could mean higher prices for grain pushers. Carriers say not to worry, farmers, as capacity will remain robust. Hey, about that price fixing thing. Target wants you out from behind your computer and back in the brick and mortar. That's right. After falling short of online sales projections, executives are returning focus to the in-store experience at Target. And that's good. Personally, I like going in Target, and maybe that's just at the stage of life that I'm at. I don't know. If you asked me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would dread it. But now as a homeowner with 2 young kids, Target comes in handy. I use Prime, but a few times a month, I gotta walk the beat. Plus, there's just practical things to source and store. The kids like it. toy section in flesh and blood blows away looking on a laptop, right? Little Jimmy? That's what I thought. They got a Starbucks in there too. Grab a unicorn frap. It's magical. What else can you want? You can get a ninja blender there. Get, I don't know, diet pills. Whatever you do with your life, you can find it in there, I think. Sky's the limit, except weapons, right? They don't have guns in Target. They don't really have guns in mass. It's not a gun culture over here. So you don't really seek guns. You have to go seek out like a gun shop. U.S. farmers again. They just won't go away this week. They have too much corn and soybean. That's why they need those vessels to get here so they can start shipping it out. Their silos are bursting at the seams. Well, they're fixing that problem because they're starting to sell to IKEA and Adidas. By the way, when I worked at FedEx Trade Networks, Adidas had just bought Reebok. And I'm calling it Adidas because that is the proper way to say it. And if you say Adidas to one of the Reebok executives, they will correct you. It is Adidas. So there you go. It was beaten into my head. Not really. It was mentioned to me once. And then because they're a client, to be polite, I would say Adidas. And it's good to pronounce things the right way. I don't need to Americanize everything. I do it enough when pronouncing people's last names from other countries on this show. I've probably already massacred 17 other pronunciations. But anyways, they got too much corn, too much soybean, so they're selling it to IKEA, Adidas, and Ford. Manufacturers of mattresses, sneakers, and cushions are starting to use these excess grains to make their products. Reebok even has some corn shoes coming out. They also have ones made of ocean waste. I think they're plastic bags and maybe those rings that are on six-packs. Do they still sell six-packs with the rings on them in the grocery store? I remember when I was a kid, there was a big campaign to cut all of the rings when you do end up with one of those in your house. And ever since, I always cut the rings before I throw them in the trash. But I'm thinking about it now, and I don't, like when I get Diet Coke, for example. Hold on a second. Take another swig for the working man. That was good. When I get the Diet Coke, it comes in a cardboard box, the 12-pack. It doesn't have those rings on them. Maybe they're on beer? I don't know. I don't drink, so who knows? No, beer comes in those cardboard things, doesn't it? It comes in cardboard too. It's either like a cardboard bottle holder. Maybe it's just selection bias. Maybe I just don't look for them in the grocery store, but they've been there all along. Next time I'm in Shaw's, I'm going to look around the aisles and see if I can find some of those rings to see if they're still out there. And I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, one day you are going to go in the ocean, but then you're going to go in a whale's belly, but then, and only then, will you be turned into a sneaker. Which sounds cool. I think they're in high demand. Sneakerheads love these kind of things, especially when they first come out. So like the first pair of corn shoes, it does not matter what these things look like. Sneakerheads will buy them. And if you want proof of concept on that, look up the sneaker called the Galaxy Foam. It's like the ugliest sneaker I've ever seen in my life, but they sell for over $1,000 on eBay. Galaxy Foam sneakers. Lines, you could get killed for those. And you'll just die there on your back like the Wicked Witch with your feet bare. A brunette walking around, clicking their heels together, trying to get home. You know, you could do a lot more with corn than you think. I was watching the show Grand Designs on Netflix. British show, building show, where architects try and make these really nice, lavish homes, but usually on a budget. And it's kind of cheating. They can do it because they're already in the building field and architects. They know people who can help them out and dig. But even with all their knowledge, it always seems like a disaster. I don't know if that's just the show trying to build up drama. It seems like a reality TV show thing to do. But they can't fake the amount of time it takes to build some of these projects. Well, anyways, they had one where this guy was going to build an entire house out of corn cob. And corn cob is just the center of the corn. When you eat all the kernels off the corn, that's the corn cob. He would take that stuff and mash it up into like a maze of sorts, some sort of mud, and you can build and manufacture houses out of this. And I'm not sure how viable or sustainable this material would be. Well, it's certainly sustainable, but I don't know how long it lasts and if weather would dictate on it. He seemed to think it can last forever. Maybe that's another thing they can do with all this corn, right? These corn silos, they can start making some corn cob homes. But I don't know how, and again, I don't know how easy it is because this is a guy who did it for a living and had built corn cob homes before. And on the show, in like 2 years' time, he still didn't finish the house. It was like the only project on Grand Designs they didn't finish. So maybe not such a great idea. Maybe go live in a shipping container instead of a corn house. But the corn shoes, pretty cool if you ask me. I could butter up to those. All right, dad joke, pretty corny. I'll move on. Maersk is tapping into the secondary shipping container market, right? I just told you not to live in a corn house, go live in a shipping container house. Well, Maersk knows you want to. That's right, the world's largest liner sold over 70,000 used containers on the aftermarket for up to $1,300 a pop. Recognizing emerging markets and moves like that by Maersk are why they're numero uno. And I know I keep saying this, but I can't wait to do an episode on other uses of containers and dual uses of containers because I read so many articles online. I try to tie it into this as much as I can, but there's only so much to say about them. But when news articles do come up, I get excited because I like shipping containers myself. You see them as pop-up stores, you see them as homes, you see them for restaurants. There was that Starbucks that was made out of one. Cool stuff. And they're selling a bunch. It's good to see these things get recycled and repurposed. Oh yeah, that guy who's selling the pools. We'll do that episode soon, I promise. And it probably beats living inside of an ear of corn. Or not, I don't know, I'm curious. I want to see a corn house in person. I've seen a container house. Ooh, another blow to Uber in the war of driverless cars. They're caught up in an imbroglio with Google over an executive who left and joined Uber. Alphabet Company, Google's owner, or parent, has long been accusing Uber of taking proprietary secrets, and a judge, just this week, agrees with them, and he has ordered Uber to return the files that were stolen by a key executive. Wow. A couple things here, though. I mean, like, yeah, sure, okay, here's the USB. Here's the USB thumb drive back. I mean, like, these aren't like physical files, right? They're digital computer files. So once they get them on their computer, they can pop up in their own network or their cloud. So what good is it anymore to give back the USB drive? I don't know. Maybe the judge's ruling sets a precedent. So if something from that day forward were to come to light of them using these files, then I guess Alphabet Company Google would already have this ruling to stand on. Maybe that's what it's all about. I'm not a lawyer. Beamer. BMW may bail out of Britain post-Brexit due to harsh operating terms. They've also threatened to move out of, Virginia? North Carolina? One of those places. We covered that several weeks ago. I don't remember off the top of my head, but they had also threatened to leave the US. They have a pretty big factory here if we start getting into too many trade wars. So, see how it goes. BMW, they're moving their weight around. They're not into this Brexit stuff and isolationism. They want a free and global market. And speaking of global markets, global container shipping is up 10% in the first quarter. But the all-important factor is revenue up as well. Well, those numbers are not in. So, I cannot say for sure. Hey, one last late-breaking thing. I just received this in my inbox, and I wanted to put it out there if anyone was interested. Saturday, June 10th, 2017, at the Portland International Jetport in Portland, Maine, that's on 1001 Westbrook Street in Portland, is the National MS Society Jet Pull. For 12 years, the National MS Society has partnered with Federal Express and the Portland International Jetport to present this unique and popular fundraising event. Here's how it works. A rope and tow bar is attached to a FedEx 757 aircraft. Teams of 25 position themselves along the rope in preparation to pull over 72 tons. Teams will pull twice. For fastest pull, then lightest pull. Awards are presented at the end of the day, and you get to go home and say that you pulled a FedEx 757 aircraft. Imagine dropping that at the bar. Imagine putting that on your Tinder profile. Mad Honeys, they're going to swipe your way. So I bet you're wondering, how can you compete in this battle of strength, stamina, and fun? Well, organize a team of 25 by recruiting friends, family members, and coworkers. Each team has to raise money, because this is going to MS. You gotta raise $1,500 to compete. That's between the 25 of you, though. The team who raises the most money will receive the highest honor of awards. The top fundraising individual will be recognized in the fall at the annual Shining Star Awards ceremony. Every dollar you raise, every tug on the tow line brings them closer to a day when our world will be free of multiple sclerosis. They're not yanking your chain. Come pull their plane. That is Saturday, June 10th, 2017. If you'd like more details, the event contact name is Sue Tidd, T-I-D-D. You can contact her at sue.tidd@nmss.org. Phone number 800-344-4867. And if the prospect of putting together a team of 25 is daunting or intimidating to you, email me at info@theshippingpod.com. I know a few people who are looking for members to their team. I can help place you on one of those teams. You can do a great thing for charity, and you can have bragging rights. I mean, really, who else can say they pulled a FedEx jetliner other than everyone else at the event? And that's a very small percentage of the population, but it should be more, because if it was, there would be no more multiple sclerosis. It's too nice of a day here for me to be sitting in front of a microphone, whistling Dixie. If you'd like to reach the Shipping Pod, info@theshippingpod.com. For all of our episodes, theshippingpod.com, all the back episodes are there, or you can go on iTunes, and if you do, please rate and review the show. 17 already have. You guys are the best. But there's still even better people out there. Or is there? I don't know. You're all great. You're all God's children. But as God's children, please go ahead and rate and review the Shipping Pod on iTunes. Awesome. That'd be great. Instagram. Always check out the Instagram. The Instagram has pictures. It has multimedia. It has things that cover whatever episode and topic that we put up. So last week, for example, for Riskier Isthmus, we covered the construction of the Panama Canal. I posted tons and tons of pictures from the early days from the Library of Congress. These were great, fantastic photographs. They're still up there, as are all of the pictures. The Instagram's great. We got a ton of followers over there, a big thriving community. I enjoy it. It's my favorite social media platform, so it's the easiest one to find and engage with me on. But I'm also on Twitter at theshippingpod.com. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook. All the Shipping Pod. We own all the Shipping Pod everywhere. The Shipping Pod, that's us. Come get it. As I mentioned, you want to give back to the show, rate and review on iTunes. We got the Patreon. That's patreon.com/theshippingpod. Patreon is a site that allows you, the listener, to give directly back to the show. Keeps me from having to read advertising about subscription underwear, subscription berries, subscription razors, subscription this, subscription that. We don't need these subscriptions all the time. But what would be nice is if you do like the show, go ahead, check it out on there. You might get a shout out on air. You might get a little bit of ad for your company. And speaking of which, we have a couple Patreon supporters that I would like to send a message to, because they're at a tier where that happens. First one is, Mom, happy Mother's Day. It was great seeing you. I know some drama occurred with the refrigerator, and I'm very dearly sorry to hear about your dog, Bailey. I hope everything comes through, and I hope that if this is the last year of his life, his 15th year, he has an amazing summer with the family, with the grandchildren. He's a much-loved animal. Our second supporter is none other than Jessica Hillier. Yeah, Jessica Hillier. She's with LaSaint Logistics, where supply meets demand. They can design and deliver the right mix of bundled and unbundled services to create a complete, integrated, and effective supply chain system for you. Put LaSaint know-how to work for your business and see the difference their knowledge can make. To reach Jessica Hillier, you can do so at JHILLYER@LESAINT.com. That's jhillier@LaSaint.com. Big supporter. Thank you. Ottawa. You lost last night, guys. Tough game against Pittsburgh. It's 1-1. You know I've got your back. Let's bring it home for Canada this time, Senators. We've had enough pie over here in the U.S. It's time to fill your bellies up. They got my respect after beating the Bruins. I'm watching the games. I'm there with you. Even the guy with the scraggly goatee and the long hair whose name evades me right now, I'm rooting for that guy too. And in the meantime, take it easy, kids. This has been Tim Dooner for The Shipping
Ella se lo come todo. ¡Ay, mi mamá! Solo quiere banana, se sienta y la pela y se la come con ganas. Banana, ella solo quiere banana, se sienta y la pela y se la come con ganas. Ella le gusta la banana madura, se lo echan con fe y con dulzura, lo come en ensalada de fruta, se va a hasta los dedos, se chupa y se chupa, porque bailando lo disfruta. Sé que de mambo te gusta y yo no tengo la culpa. el tamaño de un maní, en la medida de King Kong. A ella le gusta banana, a ella le gusta banana, le encanta banana split. Ella
Flow de calle, vengo si sale de día que lleva su banana en su equipaje, eso nunca falta porque es la fruta la que le gusta, que cuando pega disfruta. Y si se la niega se enoja, a ella le gusta grande y jugosa, cuando ella lo tiene en la boca es la fruta que la alborota.
Y entonces ¿qué vamos a hacer con Juliana? Ella come guineo nada más, ¿quieres un banana? Pregunto ¿qué vamos a hacer con Juliana? Ella come guineo nada más, ¿quieres un banana? La monachita se le queda cortita, que trae su banana porque la necesita. Ella es una descara y le gusta sin cáscara, métela en su boquita.
Yo no sé lo que tiene esa fruta, pero como a ella le gusta, con su cara de coqueta la disfruta.
es sinvergüenza, es Juliana. Tiene un problema, es adicta a la banana. Es sinvergüenza, es Juliana. Tiene un problema, es adicta a la banana. A ella le gusta bananilla, a ella le gusta bananoia, el tamaño de un maní, en la medida de King Kong. A ella le gusta bananilla, a ella le gusta bananoia, le encanta banana split. Ella se lo come todo.